The night I was first invited to observe a Freemason initiation, I expected formality, maybe men in suits shaking hands, some secret hand gestures, and a few cryptic oaths. What I did not expect was the atmosphere, the kind that makes the air hum before anything happens. It began inside an old Masonic hall, tucked between two modern office buildings. You'd miss it if you weren't looking for it. A stone structure with a bronze door that had no handle, only a faint engraving of the square and compass. The kind of building that feels older than the city itself. A tall man in a dark suit met me outside. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, then nodded, as if confirming I was expected. Inside, the smell of aged wood and candle wax clung to the air. The floors creaked like they remembered every footstep that had crossed them. I could hear a distant murmur from somewhere deeper in the hall, rhythmic, almost like chanting. They led me down a corridor lined with portraits. Every frame showed men with the same faint half-smile, each wearing the Masonic emblem pinned over their heart. The further we went, the older the portraits looked. Some were painted centuries ago, but what chilled me most was how familiar their eyes felt, as if they were still aware of who walked past. At the end of the corridor stood a heavy oak door. My guide placed his hand on it, then turned to me. "Once this door closes," he said quietly, "you don't speak, you don't ask questions, you just watch." The door opened with a deep groan. The room beyond was circular, lit only by candlelight arranged in perfect geometric patterns on the floor, triangles within circles, circles within squares. The air shimmered faintly from the heat of the flames, and shadows moved in ways that didn't always match their sources. In the center stood a single chair, carved, ancient-looking, with a single rope coiled neatly on its arm. Around it, men in dark robes moved silently. Their faces were visible, but their eyes were hidden beneath the shadows of their hoods. On their chests, each wore a golden emblem that reflected the candlelight like a faint pulse. Then a knock echoed from the far side of the room. 3 knocks, slow and deliberate. The room fell into complete silence. A man entered, blindfolded, barefoot, and wearing a white apron. 2 members led him forward by the arms, their movements synchronized. I remember the way his breathing filled the room. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was anticipation, the kind that comes before you cross a line you can never uncross. The master of the lodge stepped forward, his voice calm and practiced. "Do you come here of your own free will?" The blindfolded man nodded. "Do you seek light where there was once darkness?" "Yes," the initiate answered softly. A murmur passed through the members, a wordless vibration that felt older than speech. The master raised his hand, and the candles nearest the center dimmed. I didn't see anyone move to snuff them. They simply lessened. The air changed temperature, subtly but unmistakably. It wasn't cold or warm. It was charged, like standing beside a running generator. The initiate was led in a slow circle around the room. Each man he passed whispered something into the air. Short phrases, half in English, half in some language I didn't recognize. The whispers overlapped, forming a low drone that built in intensity. When the initiate completed the circle, he was brought before an altar, not religious but symbolic. Upon it rested an open book, a compass and a sword. The master's voice cut through the sound. "Before light can enter, the darkness must be understood." He placed a hand on the blindfolded man's shoulder. "Do you trust those who brought you here?" The initiate hesitated, then nodded. The master gestured toward the others. 2 of them stepped forward, lifting the rope from the chair. The initiate's hands were gently bound, not tightly, just enough to symbolize restraint. The master explained that it represented control over the self. But there was something deeper in the tone, something unspoken. As the ritual continued, the murmurs grew softer. The only sounds were the flickering of the candles and the sound of slow footsteps. I could swear I heard the building itself creak in rhythm, like the very walls were part of the ceremony. Then the moment came. The master reached forward and removed the blindfold. The initiate blinked rapidly in the golden candlelight, his eyes adjusting to the sudden brightness. What he saw first wasn't the men or the symbols. It was the massive mural painted on the far wall. A triangle surrounding an eye, but not the stylized version from dollar bills. This one was lifelike, textured and ancient. The eye looked wet, as though it had been freshly painted. And the strange thing was, I could have sworn it blinked. The initiate gasped, his breath catching, but no one else reacted, as if they'd expected it. The master raised a hand and said softly, "You have now seen the light, but not all light is gentle." And for a split second I understood why the Freemasons guard their initiation with such secrecy. It wasn't about power or influence. It was about experience, something designed to make you feel small, like a piece of something incomprehensibly large. As the ritual concluded, the master said one last phrase, one I still remember clearly, though I never found it in any book or record. "The truth is not given, it is remembered." The candles dimmed again, and I could feel the floor vibrating beneath my feet. When the door finally reopened, the initiate stepped out looking dazed, as if a part of him had stayed inside that room. And for the rest of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else had followed him out. I didn't sleep that night. Even after I left the lodge, the echo of those murmured chants stayed with me, looping in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. The image of that blinking eye on the wall burned behind my eyelids, glowing faintly whenever I closed them. They said the initiation was symbolic, an allegory about enlightenment, discipline, and rebirth. But if it was just symbolism, why did it feel so real? The next morning, I returned to the same street where the Masonic hall stood. Only this time, it wasn't there. The entire building seemed gone, replaced by a parking lot surrounded by scaffolding. No sign, no door, no stone, nothing. I asked a construction worker if there had been an old hall here yesterday. He looked confused. "This lot's been empty for months," he said. "That's when the unease settled in. Maybe I'd been taken somewhere else. Maybe it was deliberate, to make sure no outsider could find their way back." I decided to dig deeper. At the city's archives, I found records of a Freemason lodge that had existed in that same area over a century ago. Lodge number 91, the Builders of Light. The last recorded meeting was in 1913. After that, the paper trail vanished. But one detail stood out. The lodge had been disbanded after an incident described only as the awakening. The phrasing felt deliberate, not a scandal, not a fire, not a closure. Awakening. That night I noticed something strange in my apartment. When I turned off the lights, faint geometric lines glowed on the wall, the same patterns I'd seen on the lodge floor, circles within triangles, the compass overlapping an eye. At first, I thought it was a trick of my mind, an after-image burned from memory. But when I touched the wall, I could feel the faint heat of those lines, like static under my fingertips. Then came the dreams. In them, I was standing again inside the circular chamber. The candles were gone, replaced by golden light streaming from above, endless and blinding. The initiate stood before the altar, but this time he wasn't blindfolded. He looked right at me. "You watched," he said. "Now it watches you." I'd wake drenched in sweat, the sound of whispers still echoing in my ears. Days passed before I heard from anyone connected to that night. Then a letter arrived. No return address, only my name written in perfect handwriting. Inside was a single piece of parchment, thick and slightly yellowed. It read, "Curiosity is the first initiation, silence is the second. To understand what you witnessed, you must return to where the light began." And at the bottom a symbol, the compass and square again, but this time inverted. I didn't understand it at first. Then I realized what it meant. The light began not at the lodge, but beneath it. I remembered how the floor had vibrated that night, how the air had changed. There had to be something under that place. Using old blueprints from the archives, I found a note indicating that Lodge number 91 was built over a forgotten catacomb, one that predated the city itself. The Masons were known for building their lodges on sacred ground, aligning with invisible geometries they called ley lines. It was superstition, most said, but after what I'd seen, superstition felt like truth waiting to be proven. I went back. The construction site was quiet, fenced off, and half covered by tarps. Under the moonlight, the air felt heavy, the kind of silence that isn't absence, but presence. I slipped through a gap in the fence and walked to where the hall once stood. The ground was uneven, but the faint outline of stone was still there, the imprint of a circular foundation. Then I saw it. One slab had shifted slightly, revealing a narrow gap beneath. A faint gold shimmer leaked through, barely visible like light trapped under the earth. I dropped to my knees, brushed away the dust, and saw a symbol etched into the stone. The same inverted compass, the same eye, and then a whisper, not behind me, below me. It wasn't in English. The tone was rhythmic, slow, familiar. The same cadence from that night. I don't remember deciding to go down. I just remember moving, pushing the slab aside and slipping into the darkness below. The passage was narrow, carved from rough stone, the air thick with the smell of old earth and metal. My phone's flashlight barely cut through the black. The walls were covered in carvings, not words but diagrams, geometric spirals, human figures reaching upward toward radiant shapes, and in the center of one carving, the all-seeing eye, surrounded by flames. I followed the tunnel until it opened into a vast underground chamber. Candles flickered along the edges of the room, dozens of them, though no one had lit them. In the center stood the same chair from the initiation, perfectly intact, and beside it, the initiate. He turned toward me slowly, his eyes glowing faintly gold. "I was told someone would come," he said, voice calm but distant. "What is this place?" I whispered. He smiled faintly. "The second degree isn't given, it's found." Before I could speak, the ground trembled. The golden light spread across the walls, illuminating the carvings. They weren't static anymore. The lines began to move, flowing like liquid light, connecting every figure into one continuous pattern. The initiate stepped forward and placed a hand on my chest. "You watched," he said again, "and now you've been seen." The candles flared white-hot. My phone shut off instantly. For a moment I was blind. When my vision returned, I was standing alone. No candles, no chair, no initiate, just silence. I climbed back to the surface, trembling, heart pounding. The city lights looked normal, but the world didn't feel the same anymore. When I got home, I turned on the light and froze. On my apartment wall, faint and glowing in gold, was a new symbol. This one wasn't geometric. It was an eye, drawn in the same perfect style as the one from the mural. Only this time it wasn't blinking. It was open. For days after I left the underground chamber, the world felt different. Not visibly, not physically, but perceptually. Colors looked sharper, sounds carried strange harmonics, and every reflective surface seemed to shimmer with faint gold when I looked too long. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that same hum beneath my ribs, like the vibration from the lodge floor had embedded itself inside me. I stopped trying to explain it to anyone. The few friends I told either laughed it off or told me I needed rest. But there was no rest anymore, only awareness, constant pulsing awareness. The symbol on my wall glowed faintly every night, even when I painted over it. The gold seeped back through the paint by morning, as if the wall itself refused to forget. Sometimes it dimmed, almost fading, only to flare up again the moment I looked directly at it, like it knew when I was watching. I started keeping notes, everything I could remember about the initiation, the underground chamber, the voice of the initiate. Patterns emerged, the geometric symbols, the repeated phrases, the way light always appeared at moments of heightened awareness. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. Then I began to notice something stranger. In mirrors, my reflection wasn't quite right anymore. The lighting was always off. The golden hue from the lodge candles seemed to follow me. Once, brushing my teeth, I looked up and saw myself blink, a half-second too late. Another time, in the reflection of a bus window, I watched myself smile, even though I wasn't. That's when I remembered what he said, underground. You watched, and now you've been seen. Seen by what, though? The Freemasons called it the light. But this wasn't the warmth of enlightenment. It was something vast, conscious and ancient. A gaze that didn't look at you, but through you. I needed answers. I reached out to a man named Calder, a historian who'd written a few controversial papers about Masonic symbology and esoteric architecture. When I called him, his tone shifted the moment I mentioned the Builders of Light. You shouldn't even know that name, he said quietly. That lodge doesn't exist anymore. It does, I told him. Or it did. I was there. He sighed heavily, then agreed to meet. We met at a dim cafe near the edge of town. He was older, sharp-eyed, with a stack of worn notebooks spilling over with sketches and diagrams. Do you understand what they made you witness? He asked. I shook my head. A ritual, I thought, an initiation. Calder leaned closer. No, what you saw wasn't initiation. It was invocation. That word hit me like cold water. He explained that some lodges believed enlightenment wasn't achieved through study or meditation, but through contact. That the light was not a metaphor, but a consciousness. A force that could be summoned and bound through ritual geometry, the same patterns I'd seen on the lodge floor and my walls. The symbols, he said, are like mirrors, but not the kind that reflect you, the kind that reflect it. I asked what happens to those who see the light. Calder looked down, hesitating. They change. Some say they become enlightened, others say consumed. Their perception fractures until they stop being observers and become vessels. Vessels for what? I asked. He didn't answer. He just slid a page across the table, an old diagram of a circle intersected by a triangle. At the center was an eye drawn in perfect symmetry. Around it he'd written in faded ink, "The eye sees those who seek it." I left the cafe shaken. The air outside felt heavier, distorted. Every sound echoed too long, every shadow lingered too still. When I got home, the symbol on my wall had grown larger. Not painted, grown. The lines extended toward the ceiling like spreading veins of gold. And in the center of the eye, I could now see something faint, a reflection that wasn't my own. That night I woke to a soft humming. It came from every corner of the apartment, a low resonant vibration that made my glassware tremble. The golden lines pulsed faintly in rhythm with my heartbeat. Then I heard it, a whisper. It wasn't external, it was inside my head. One word. Return. I sat up, gasping, the sound still echoing behind my eyes. The air shimmered faintly, and for a moment I saw a figure standing in the corner of my room, the initiate. He didn't speak. He just pointed toward the wall, toward the glowing eye. I blinked, and he was gone, but the hum didn't stop. The next morning, I tried to leave the city. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and drove toward the highway. But the GPS glitched every few minutes, redirecting me toward the same area, the construction site. No matter which turn I took, every road seemed to bend back toward it. By dusk, I gave in and parked near the fence again. The ground shimmered faintly under the dying light. The workers were gone, but the hum, the same low vibration, drifted up from below. I knew then that Calder was right. The initiation hadn't ended. It had only begun. When I stepped through the fence, the air grew thick again. My phone's light flickered, and faint golden motes floated through the darkness like dust illuminated by unseen light. Each step closer to the foundation made the hum louder, like a heartbeat buried under the earth. And then faintly I saw movement. The same rope, the same chair, standing in the open lot, untouched by wind or rain. I took one step closer. The hum stopped. Complete silence. Then a voice, clear, soft, and unearthly. The third degree awaits. The ground beneath me trembled, splitting slightly. Through the crack, I saw light, not gold, but blinding white, pure and endless. And in that instant, I understood what the builders of light had built. Not a lodge, not a hall, a gateway. The light rose upward, swallowing everything. My shadow stretched, bent and split into several shapes. For a heartbeat, I saw all of them. Versions of me, reflections, each wearing the same faint smile as the portraits in that corridor. Then the world went white. When the light consumed everything, I thought it was death. But death, I realized, doesn't hum. This light wasn't gentle or holy or warm. It was alive. It pulsed with rhythm, like the heartbeat of something vast, ancient and aware. I don't know how long I was inside it. Time didn't move there. It rippled. Every thought echoed back at me in whispers. Every breath stretched like it belonged to someone else. There were figures, too, outlines made of gold dust, shifting and folding into patterns, their movements synchronized like a living geometry. At the center of it all stood the initiate, the same man I'd seen before. But he was different now. His body wasn't solid anymore. It flickered like heat haze. His eyes glowed with the same impossible white light that filled the space. "You shouldn't have come back," he said, though his lips didn't move. The words bloomed directly inside my skull, echoing in rhythm with the pulse of light. "I didn't choose to," I said. Or thought I did. My voice felt detached, like it came from everywhere and nowhere. He looked at me with an expression that wasn't anger or pity. It was recognition. "You crossed the threshold when you watched. Once you see the light, you belong to it." Behind him, the geometric figures turned, all facing me now. Their outlines merged, forming a vast circular shape. The golden geometry I'd seen on the floor of the lodge now hung in the air. Perfect, symmetrical, radiating energy. The same square, the same compass, the same all-seeing eye. Only now it wasn't painted. It was breathing. "What is this?" I asked. "Who are you?" He stepped closer, and as he did, I saw faint reflections ripple across his face. Hundreds of faces, all layered atop each other. "Who am I?" he repeated softly. "I am everyone who's ever taken the vow, everyone who's opened the gate, every Mason who sought truth and found more than they could bear." His body shimmered, and suddenly the faces within him became clear. All those portraits from the corridor, their half-smiles identical, their eyes glowing faintly. "The truth," he continued, "is that the initiation was never about joining a brotherhood. It was about feeding one." My stomach turned. Feeding. "The builders of light don't build temples," he said. "They build vessels. Each initiate opens the way a little wider. Each oath binds another thread of consciousness to the light, and once it sees you, it never lets go." I looked down. The light was crawling up my arms, seeping into my veins like liquid gold. My pulse flickered in patterns, geometric and unnatural. I tried to step back, but the ground beneath me wasn't solid anymore. The air itself thickened, pulling at my limbs like water. "You were never supposed to be here," he said. "You witnessed what cannot be unseen, and now it's watching through you." I screamed, or thought I did. The sound twisted into light, dissolving mid-air. I felt weightless, disoriented, my body splitting into thousands of reflections, each slightly delayed, each smiling when I wasn't. Then everything stopped. I was back in my apartment. The lights were off. My phone lay on the floor beside me, its screen cracked. The hum was gone. For a moment I thought it was over. Maybe it had all been a hallucination. But then I saw it. On the wall, where the glowing eye used to be, now stood a doorway of pure gold light. Faint but visible even through the shadows. It wasn't flat, it had depth, like looking into another world. I could see vague figures moving on the other side, silhouettes in robes, walking in slow circles. I stepped closer. My reflection in the window looked wrong again. Its eyes were glowing faintly white. And then the voice returned. The third degree is completion. I stumbled back. The golden light flickered, then dimmed. But when I looked at my arm, I saw faint symbols beneath my skin. The compass, the square, the eye, glowing like veins of gold. I grabbed a knife, desperate, and scraped the skin. But the light wasn't on the surface. It pulsed beneath, deep in the muscle, inside the blood. That's when I realized I hadn't escaped the light. I'd become part of it. The next few days blurred together. My reflection changed faster now. In mirrors, I'd see myself standing behind me, smiling faintly, the same expression from those portraits. My eyes would flash gold when I blinked. Sometimes I'd hear chanting in my sleep, echoing from walls that didn't exist. Calder called once. "You've seen it, haven't you?" he asked, voice trembling. "It's inside you now." "What is it?" I demanded. "How do I stop it?" He hesitated. "You can't stop light. You can only cover it or let it consume you." Before I could respond, the line went dead. That night, the golden doorway returned, brighter this time, almost beckoning. The whisper came again, louder, layered with many voices. "Return to the lodge. Complete the circle." I couldn't fight it anymore. My body moved on its own, drawn like metal to a magnet. I drove through the empty streets until I reached the site again. The construction equipment was gone now. The earth had split wide open, revealing the same circular pit from my visions. Light poured from below, spilling upward in soft waves. I climbed down, each step trembling beneath my weight. The hum returned, deeper than before. It shook the ground, the air, my bones. At the center of the pit stood the same chair, the same altar. Only now the initiate was gone. In his place was an empty robe, folded neatly as if waiting, and when I touched it, the ground began to glow. The light spread outward in fractal patterns, drawing the compass and square in perfect form. Then a voice whispered directly behind me, my own. "Welcome, brother." I turned. My reflection stood there, solid, smiling, eyes glowing pure white. The last thing I remember is reaching out to stop it, but it reached faster. When our hands touched, everything dissolved into brilliance. Now, I write this not as a warning, but as record, though I don't know who's writing anymore. The words appear before I think them. The letters shimmer faintly gold. Sometimes when I blink, I see the lodge again, perfect, eternal, bathed in light. The members stand in a circle chanting softly. In the center is a chair, and in that chair sits someone new. He's blindfolded, trembling, whispering the same words I once heard. "I come here of my own free will." And somewhere, faintly, the light hums again, growing brighter, hungry, endless.